thought you might find this area pretty interesting. So I'm at a state park here. It's called Judge Magny State Park, and what it's really known for is the Devil's Kettle. So I'm gonna start heading down towards the Devil's Kettle, but before I start walking down there, I thought I'd show you this. This is pretty cool. So this is actually an old root cellar is what it is. Just think of it as like a giant refrigerator. Okay, the roof on it is caved in. The roof used to be way up here. It did cave down, so that that's where they would keep their food cold, their chicken and their deer and their probably moose and their beer. And yeah, so what we're seeing here is actually the foundation of a building. I'm thinking of it as like a barracks, and they burnt down. So this whole area got torched actually a couple times over the years. So there's a lot of these foundations within this area, and again, it was like yeah, really like a bunkhouse is what it was. See the dude fishing down there? Poor guy's snagged up. Well, he lost that lure. All right, let's go check out the Devil's Kettle. So we're almost to the top of the notorious stairs. If you've done any research on the state park, you'll know that the one big thing in the comments and people talk about is the never-ending staircase here. So on the way up to the Devil's Kettle, I'm kind of out of breath. It's like uphill, 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 uphill for about a mile. It's a good uphill too. Gets the heart pumping. Then you'll come to this top of these stairs, which you'll see here in a second. And then down you go, down about 200 stairs. So how the Devil's Kettle works, what the big mystery is about it, what the talk is about it is, there's a river. It's called the Brule River, B-R-U-L-E, Brule River. Comes out of the wilderness of Minnesota, so to say, one of the most secluded parts of the state of Minnesota. Really, it is a true wilderness where it comes out of. And as it's flowing towards Lake Superior, it dumps into or empties out into Lake Superior. And about a mile before it hits the shoreline of Lake Superior, that river splits. One end goes down the Devil's Kettle, which essentially is a turbine is what it is. So when it gets towards and starts going down into that Devil's Kettle hole, the water actually starts spinning and has a cyclone. Okay, just if you think of your washing machine when it's on spin cycle. So the issue that they've had over all these years in solving it is still, technically it's an unsolved mystery. Whenever something gets thrown into the Devil's Kettle, it just gets disintegrated. Okay, goes into that whirlpool, and nobody knows where that whirlpool or where that water comes out. So we know the river splits. We know one end goes down through the waterfall, and we also know the other end goes into that never-ending tunnel, which, as being a kid, I've known about this place my whole life. I'm from this area in Minnesota, and we always thought it just comes out in China, right? So we never really quite knew where it came out. So over the years, people have thrown logs in there, and ping pong balls is kind of the biggest thing you'll hear about. People will write their names on ping pong balls, and they'll dump them in the river, hoping that these ping pong balls will make it and go into the Devil's Kettle and come out the other side. We got it. There it is. There's nothing on it though. Rip off. Somebody will find it as it comes out into Lake Superior with their phone number and name on it. They'll get a phone call, and boom, we solved Devil's Kettle. Never happened yet. Hey, by the way, here we are. There's the stairs. We'll go down there in just a second, but let me catch my breath. So over the years, the ping pong ball trick has not worked. They say that people have thrown fridges in there, whole vehicles and logs, and you name it. Okay, nothing's ever come out the other end. So I have a really hard time believing that somebody put a car down there, or even a refrigerator, or anything big like that, because on the other side of the river are steep cliffs, and it's a very treacherous walk to get there. The side that I'm on right now that you're seeing here is actually the trail side, the state park side. The other side is completely wild. Okay, you have to walk a long ways down the Superior hiking trail to even get close to where it is. Once you get close to where it is, you have to grab your compass and just start trekking through the woods forever and ever and ever and ever, up rock faces, down rock faces. So certainly not an easy place to get to. Certainly not an easy place to try all these different ideas of trying to solve it. So that's been the mystery so far. So one goal that I have is to try and solve it. The closest they've actually been to solving it is they did take a sensor and they put a sensor up river of the Devil's Kettle, and they measured the amount of water flow, or the volume of water coming towards the Devil's Kettle and river. And then again, they went on the downstream side of the river and measured that flow as well. They said the flow was pretty similar, but again, not exact, man. So it hasn't technically been solved. So a digital scale said maybe it's kind of close, sort of, so maybe it's kind of solved, but not really. So then the other thing that they were going to do to completely verify it was actually dump a bunch of vegetable oil into the Devil's Kettle with dye in it, thinking that the vegetable oil isn't going to be bad for the environment, kill fish, anything like that. And then if you throw some green dye in that vegetable oil, throw it in there, the thought is you can see it come out the other side, or come out that hole underneath the Devil's Kettle. That has actually been tried in the past. It did fail. They were going to try it again, and the Forest Service said no, ain't gonna happen. So again, technically it has not been solved. So I am thinking of some ideas myself to solve it. So if you have any ideas to solve it, leave a comment below. The difficulty about solving it with technology is, number one, there is no cell reception here. We're in the middle of nowhere. There is no Wi-Fi. There's no cell reception, period. The other thing I've thought is, hey, maybe I could just throw a GoPro in a ball or something, throw it in there. Anything like a GoPro or anything that has some sort of signal, like a Bluetooth signal, when you actually break the surface with that, put it in the water, that breaks that connection. So Bluetooth does not hold once it's put in the water. The only thing I can really think of, and I don't know if it'll work or not, is to use like a Kevlar ball. Because again, like I said a minute ago, the turbine action is the problem. As debris gets brought into the Devil's Kettle, man, it just spins and spins and crushes that stuff, and that's why it's never been clogged over the years. It just destroys anything that gets put into it. So if I had a Kevlar ball and maybe cut a couple of grooves on it, and actually maybe epoxied in some GPS sensors, like 3 or 4 GPS sensors, that way no matter what end of the ball was facing up, I could then potentially connect to it with Bluetooth or something like that. As it does come out into Lake Superior, I could sit out there with the canoe. We're a mile from Lake Superior, so it wouldn't take that long if it did make it through. So I don't know. So if you have any ideas on something like that, I live really close to this area. I'll give it a whirl if I think I can make it work. And we obviously don't want to be polluting the lake with anything that's nasty or toxic. So all right, so let's keep hiking down these stairs now. As we get closer here, back to the Devil's Kettle, we'll turn this back on. Boy, I get completely and utterly soaked standing below that waterfall. So another thing that's really interesting here too is that this area kind of has its own ecosystem. It's so humid here, and everything is just so wet from this river and all the waterfalls, that I'm here in the early spring. So later, as the spring progresses and into summer, you know, there's all kinds of moss everywhere, lichens everywhere. It's not uncommon to see lady slippers, a lot of different orchids. You'll see a lot of Monotropa uniflora, which is Indian pipe, which is really cool. Fun to make a tincture out of that stuff. So it's not totally uncommon to see a moose in this area. Okay, so this is definitely a area that's rich with moose, definitely rich with whitetail. We probably saw 20 whitetail on the way here, I suppose. you see here too, if you look close, you're going to see on the other side, it's absolutely a cliff. And so I have a really super hard time believing a car was ever put in here, or a refrigerator, or anything big, because it's impossible to get to. You have to have awesome compass and navigation skills. Here, check it out. All right, well, that's Devil's Kettle for you in a nutshell. One thing too to add, which I didn't, is across the highway from here, from the state park, is Nanabuju Lodge. It's a restaurant, a fancy restaurant, dinner restaurant, reservations only kind of restaurant. That was also there from the original onset, before this actually became kind of a hobo camp in the late 20s, early 30s. This was actually intended to be a resort, a wealthy resort. Along this area of Lake Superior is one of the wealthiest areas in the world at one point in time, like Duluth, for example, Minnesota. Very well known for mining, a lot of ore mining and a lot of logging, a lot of lumber industries back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So at one time this was to be golf courses and a giant resort and tennis courts and so on and so forth. So that Nanabuju Lodge was actually purchased separately from the state park itself. So check that out. We haven't eaten there yet. It's on our list of things to do, but it's so cool to see. It's got the wildest colors and on the inside and out. And while you're eating there, once you're done, stop and walk along Lake Superior. That area of Lake Superior is known to have some of the coolest and most abundant Superior agates in the country. So Angel and I have hunted that beach numerous times, so that's really a fun spot to stop and check out. So yeah, if you like this content, hit subscribe. We live in northeastern Minnesota in the Arrowhead, and we're always doing this kind of stuff. Try and put out a video about once a week. So yeah, hit subscribe and we'll see you guys on the next one.